Welcome back. We are still with Josh Onsando, who's a public policy analyst and political strategist, and Tommy Rendo, who's a policy analyst. Now let's talk about the next area, which is essentially on policy. Now, proposal to see every Kenyan above the age of 18 years contribute to the National Hospital Insurance Fund scheme has been shot down by the National House, handing a reprieve to poor households in the country. In what would have seen every individual above the age of 18 years contribute 500 shillings monthly in a remodeled universal healthcare coverage UHC scheme for outpatients and inpatient services, including maternity, dialysis, cancer treatment, and surgery, the National Assembly Committee on Health rejected the proposal for compulsory NHIF contributions and instead suggested that the national and county governments foot the bills for the 5.1 million of poor households across the 47 counties. Employers will also not be compelled to match their employee NHIF contributions, as the bill indicated that this was going to affect the wage bill of some of the companies, and also rejected the proposal to compel business owners to match the monthly contribution, saying it would hurt the wage bill of the companies and their ability to create jobs. This therefore means that NHIF ability to raise more funds for the full realization of the universal health care has been heavily affected, and it remains to be seen what the government's next action could be in its race to offer affordable health care to all Kenyans by 2022, as was a promise for the Jubilee government back in 2013, if you voted for them and if you remember what their manifesto was under the Big Four agenda. All right, let's cross over and look at this data that we have for you this morning here on our NHIF contributions and payouts all the way from 2016 to 2018, 2019. One trend has been rising as well. Let's cross over to that next data set. NHIF contributions always rising all the way to 2018, 2019, and we do expect that in 2020, 2021, they did cross that 60 billion mark, making them the richest insurer in the country. Josh, is this potentially the start to the end of the government's UHC dream?
First of all, Chacha, let me begin with the data set you just showed, and when we say NHIF is the richest insurer, in 20, I think it was, the data set begins from 2016, I think.
Yes.
When they collected 32 billion,
yes,
paid out 14 billion.
Yes.
So they were collecting about twice as much as they were paying out. Now they are collecting, I think, about 60 billion. They're paying out about 54 billion. You can see the problem there. They're not an insurer anymore. They're just a purveyor of money. If you're collecting as much as you're paying out, then you're not in the insurance business, so to speak. Now, to speak to whether this is a death knell to the Jubilee's plan for universal healthcare. Now, here's the thing from a policy perspective. What universal healthcare is that every person within a territory, a country, is able to afford healthcare, is able to access healthcare where they need it, when they need it, without financial strain.
Yes.
So when the Jubilee government was saying they're bringing universal healthcare education, universal healthcare coverage, and then they're saying every Kenyan should pay 500, I think this would have been the only UHC program I know in the world that was funded by citizens. Typically, what a universal healthcare program is a program that is funded by revenue collections.
Yes.
You don't expect someone who's not earning 6,000 shillings a year in West Pokot to pay 6,000 shillings a year for their healthcare, and then you call it universal healthcare. What you're saying is everyone is paying for their own healthcare. And we have models of universal healthcare coverage in the world. We have Italy, we have Spain, we have Sweden, we have Denmark, we have India, we have Portugal. All these are universal healthcare coverage programs that are funded through revenue collection. Now let's look at the numbers. We have about, according to NHIF, about 16 million adults who are not paying their contributions every month.
Yes.
Now let's assume out of those 16 million, 10 cannot completely afford, and 10 is a very generous figure. if government paid for those 10 and it's 10 million and you're talking about 6,000 a year, that's 60 billion shillings. For an economy that has a 3 trillion shilling budget, I mean, I don't see how 60 billion should be such a challenge. So the reality is you can't call it universal healthcare if the citizens are paying for it, if every citizen is paying for it. The idea behind universal healthcare is that there are some people who will be able to afford to pay, but there are people who can't pay. But regardless of the inability to pay, they should be able to access healthcare. So what the government of the Ministry of Health took to Parliament as a bill is not a universal healthcare bill. It is an everyone pay for healthcare bill. So speaking now from the political side,
Yes.
I suspect that now, our Parliament, generally speaking, always approves what the relevant committees say. So I expect that this then will be reflected in the bill that will be presented to the president. I expect that the president will not sign the bill and will return it to the House. And then I expect that bill will be the basis on which the executive and Parliament will negotiate for one thing or the other. But ultimately, I don't see it pass. And even if it passed, then I don't see that helping anyone, because even if then you say every adult in Kenya has to pay 500 shillings a month, how do you even enforce that?
They give us the enforcement, Josh, and last week there were some proposals that came through the bill. They said they're going to treat NHIF as a KRA pin as well.
Yes.
So potentially there are some services that you would not get. There are some state services or some state business that you will not do without giving out your NHIF.
And I get that, but you see, when we're talking about 5 million households of extremely poor Kenyans across the counties.
Yes.
These are people who don't access government services to begin with. So a young man herding is, and I'm sorry to keep using the Pokot example, a young man herding his cattle in Pokot. When is he ever going to encounter a government agency or need a government service? So the very vulnerable people are the people you cannot enforce to using this threat of, treating NHIF like a pin. I know people, even in Nairobi, who don't have a KRA pin to date. Some in their 40s. They don't access government services, so it's very difficult to enforce some of these things. I mean, on paper it might be easy, but on the ground, Mambo is different.
Mambo is different. All right, let me cross over to Tommy Wendell this morning. Tommy, you hear what Josh is saying? I mean,
yes.
He doesn't get it. I mean, if it's going to be universal health care, then that should be heavily funded by the government, that the citizens should not be forced to pay for it. Fine. So, Tommy, the question is going to be, how a county is going to pay for this 5.1 million households in the country that cannot afford that 6,000 shillings per month, when in reality the counties themselves are crying for money from the national government?
Simba, you and I, we talked about this a while back when they were saying that that private institutions or employers should match or pay for their employees in NHIF. We talked about this. And this was my solution. I said, we have 49 members of the National Assembly. We have 67 members of the Senate. Make sure they can't go outside the country for healthcare, that they have to go to Kenyatta Hospital or any other hospital like everybody else, and that solution, that problem will be solved very, very quickly, very fast.
All right, let's look into that as well, Tommy. Now, in case, of course, we do know they're going to find ways around it, and you hear what Josh is saying, normally the National House votes in favor of the National House committees. It looks as if this, the president, could not agree to. Is it bound to send it back again, this back and forth? Which why I asked, is this potentially the end to the UHC program and that the president was dreaming about then?
Right now, politically looking at it, there's a division within the parliament.
Yes.
But still, they'll still vote as a bloc in one way or another. So it comes down to the president and what he feels is right for the nation. He made a promise, he should live up to it.
Yes.
Now he has to get his party in line to get it done. But now here is the question, how do you pay for it without affecting the regular mwananchi? We spend a lot of money on other things that we waste on that could be used in healthcare. So maybe, they reprioritize how they spend their money so that everybody in Kenya can get universal healthcare. Especially like the person from Pokot that Josh alluded to,
Yes.
who might need it even if they don't know they do. You know,
Yes.
you never know how healthcare is important until you really do. Yeah. And you know, majority of the population is young, so you don't really get sick often. But the older population, they know that they know the pain of it monetarily. So yeah, let's wait to see what the president does, whether he signs the bill into law or not.
Pretty much. So Josh,
Yeah.
let's look at that as well. Now then, indeed, you're saying, well, you don't expect that the National House is going to send the bill back to the committee as well, so they can look at it. They might actually pass it the way it is and send it to the president, who's not going to be happy with the way it looks. What is the option out then for the president if indeed he's going to deliver this UHC before 2022?
I think he has to take a brave decision. I mean, first of all, I'm sure he'll take the bill back to Parliament, assuming Parliament passes it as it's come from the committee.
Yes.
Then he'll refuse to assent and probably try and negotiate from that, because again, this is a promise he made. But I'll maintain he promised universal healthcare. What he's trying to deliver through that bill is not universal healthcare. And I think it's just to say, you know, spend. Again, I said 60 billion out of a 1.3 trillion economy, a 3 trillion economy is not a lot of money, especially because Totti says they waste money on other things that are not particularly essential. So if we're going to do, and again, in Kenya, again, we did have a model, we did have an example already. I remember when the NAC government came in power in 2002, and about 2 years later, the Ministry of Health then and Charity Ngilu came up with the NSHIF bill. And so we have, I mean, the reality is for you to have universal healthcare, it has to come through a social protection safety net perspective. Not saying that every person has to pay 500 shillings a year and then you get healthcare. You're just telling them to pay for their own healthcare.
Pretty much. Looks as if we have to wait and see exactly how this turns out, because it's one of those bills that the president is asked for the National House to pass on an urgency basis. Looks as if it's not going to be that urgent anymore. I'd like to say thank you very much to Josh Onsando, who's a public policy analyst and political strategist, and Tommy Rendo, who's a policy analyst as well, for making this conversation this morning a success. Take them back to the time that they came into the studio this morning on YouTube, Metropole TV Kenya, across all your social media platforms at Metropole TV KE. I am at KRA Simba. Good morning. That's your economic review this morning.